The evening was cold, and the city lights flickered against the dark sky like tiny stars trying to comfort the tired streets. Big Shaq had just finished attending a charity basketball event, one of those nights where laughter, cheers, and energy surrounded him. The event had gone well, people shook his hand, kids wanted pictures, and everyone seemed excited just to be near him. But now, as he stepped out of the warm building and onto the chilly sidewalk, a quieter world met him. The street was buzzing with cars rushing home, people with shopping bags walking quickly, and the faint smell of roasted chestnuts from a nearby vendor drifted through the air. Shaq walked slowly toward his car, his long strides echoing against the pavement. He had been through many busy nights like this before, and usually, his focus was on getting home, resting, and preparing for the next day. But tonight, something unusual caught his attention. Near the corner of the street, tucked almost out of sight, sat a young girl. She was small, with a thin frame wrapped in a jacket that looked far too big for her, as if it had once belonged to someone else. The cardboard sign resting against her knees had shaky letters written with a black marker, "Hungry and alone." People passed her without slowing down. Some glanced, most didn't. A few shook their heads, as if her presence was something inconvenient. She sat still, her eyes following every passerby, her hope rising and falling with each step that went by her. Her lips moved silently, as though she was practicing the words but too nervous to say them out loud. Then, in a soft but clear voice, she finally called out, "Please, sir, can you help me?" Shaq paused mid-step. At first, he thought maybe she was calling to someone else. But when he looked back, her eyes were fixed directly on him. He was used to strangers asking him for all kinds of things: autographs, selfies, even business favors. But this was different. The way she looked at him wasn't the gaze of a fan excited to see a celebrity. It was the gaze of someone who had run out of choices. Shaq felt his heart slow down. The busy city seemed to fade away, leaving only him and the girl sitting in silence between them. He walked closer, careful not to scare her. "Hey, what's your name?" he asked gently. His deep voice carried warmth this time, not the playful tone he often used on stage or in interviews. The girl hesitated, her fingers tightening around the edges of her cardboard sign. "Leah," she whispered. Her voice was thin, like it hadn't been used much. "How old are you, Leah?" Shaq asked. 16, she said, looking down at her shoes that had holes in the front. She didn't sound like she wanted to share more, but her eyes betrayed the truth: they carried a story too heavy for her young shoulders. Shaq crouched down, his tall frame making the movement a little awkward, but he wanted to meet her at eye level. "You eaten anything today?" he asked. Leah shook her head quickly, almost embarrassed to admit it. "Not since yesterday morning," she murmured. Shaq sighed softly. He looked around at the crowded street, full of life and movement, yet here was a girl invisible to everyone else. He wasn't the type to just walk away. "All right," he said, standing up. "Come on, let's get you some food." Leah's eyes widened, unsure if she should believe him. People had promised her things before, then disappeared. "Really?" she asked cautiously, her voice trembling between hope and disbelief. "Really?" Shaq nodded. He stretched out his large hand, waiting for her to trust him. After a pause, she picked up her small backpack, the only thing she owned, and slowly stood. Her legs seemed tired, but she followed him, almost like she was afraid this moment would vanish if she didn't move quickly enough. They walked a few blocks until they reached a small diner glowing with warm yellow light. It wasn't a fancy place, just a local spot with the smell of fresh burgers and fries filling the air. Shaq pushed open the door, holding it for Leah, who stepped inside hesitantly. The warmth of the diner hit her face, and for the first time that day, she felt comfort. People inside turned their heads when they saw Shaq, whispering and pointing, but he waved politely and walked toward a booth in the corner, making sure Leah had space to sit. When the waitress arrived, Shaq didn't look at the menu. Instead, he asked Leah, "What do you like to eat?" Leah froze. She wasn't used to being asked what she wanted. Most days, she just took what she could find. Anything is fine," she said nervously. Shaq smiled. "Then let's make it easy. Burger, fries, and a milkshake. Sound good?" Her lips curved into a tiny smile, the first he had seen. "Yes, thank you," she whispered. As they waited for the food, the silence between them felt heavy at first. Shaq wanted her to feel safe, not interrogated. So he started with something light. "You know, I used to eat way too many burgers when I was your age," he said with a chuckle. "Didn't think I'd grow into a giant like this, though." Leah looked up at him and almost laughed, a soft sound that carried relief. "You're really tall," she said, her tone almost teasing. "That's what everyone says," Shaq replied with a grin. Slowly, the walls she had built around herself began to lower. When the food arrived, Leah's hands trembled slightly as she reached for the burger. She tried to take small bites, polite and careful, but her hunger made it hard. Shaq noticed and said nothing, just let her eat at her pace. He sipped his drink, watching the life slowly return to her face with each bite. Finally, after a few minutes, Leah put the burger down and wiped her mouth with a napkin. She looked at him, her eyes filled with something between gratitude and exhaustion. Why are you helping me?" she asked quietly. Shaq leaned forward. "Because you asked. And because you matter," he said simply. His words weren't rehearsed, just honest. Leah blinked, and for the first time, her eyes glistened with tears she didn't let fall. No one had told her she mattered in a long, long time. Outside, the city continued to move, busy and unaware. But in that small diner booth, something meaningful had begun. It was just a simple act, a warm meal shared between a famous man and a forgotten girl, but it was the first step in a journey that would uncover truths neither of them expected. Shaq didn't know yet why she was out there, what had brought her to the streets, or what secrets her past carried. But one thing was certain, this was no ordinary encounter. And something deep inside him told him that walking away from Leah wasn't an option. The diner felt warmer than any place Leah had been in weeks. The hum of conversations, the clinking of plates, and the smell of food made it feel like another world compared to the cold sidewalks she had been sleeping on. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't just surviving. She was sitting at a table, eating a hot meal, and someone was actually looking at her like she was a person, not a shadow on the street. Big Shaq leaned back in the booth, his arms crossed loosely as he watched her finish the last of her fries. He didn't want to push her, but he knew there was a story behind those tired eyes. She had introduced herself as Leah, 16 years old, but beyond that, she hadn't shared much. Shaq understood that trust wasn't something you could demand, it had to be earned. When she finally leaned back in her seat, full for the first time in days, she let out a small sigh. Her hands rested on the table, thin and delicate, as if even holding a fork had taken effort. For a moment, she stayed quiet, staring at the patterns on the table as though deciding if she should say more. Then, almost like a whisper carried by courage, she began. "My mom, she died last year," Leah said softly. The words hung heavy in the air. Shaq didn't interrupt. He simply nodded, encouraging her to continue. "After that, everything fell apart. We didn't have much before, but at least we had each other. When she was gone, there was no one left." Her voice shook, but she forced herself to keep speaking. "My dad. I don't even know him. He left before I was born. People said he moved far away. I never met him." She took a deep breath, her fingers tracing circles on the table. "So they put me in foster care. Different houses. Different people. Some were okay, but others. I didn't feel safe." She stopped, biting her lip, as if afraid to share too much. Shaq leaned forward, his deep voice calm. You don't have to tell me everything if you don't want to. But you're safe here, all right? No one's going to hurt you. Leah gave a small nod, appreciating the space he gave her. I tried to stay, she continued. But it felt like nobody really wanted me. I was just another responsibility, another name on a file. So one night, I packed my bag and left. I thought maybe I'd be better off on my own. Her words carried both defiance and sadness. She had chosen freedom, but it came with hunger, loneliness, and danger. At first, I thought I could manage, she said, her voice trembling. I slept at bus stops, in stairwells. Sometimes people gave me food, sometimes they didn't. I thought, maybe I'd figure it out. But then days turned into weeks. And it just kept getting harder. Shaq sat quietly, his heart heavy as he listened. He had grown up with his own struggles, but hearing the pain in her story made him realize how easily young lives could slip through the cracks. Fame and money couldn't erase the truth that so many kids like Leah were left unseen. You've been carrying all that on your own, he said gently. Leah nodded, her eyes fixed on her hands. That's a lot for anyone, let alone someone your age. For a while, they sat in silence, the sounds of the diner filling the space between their words. Shaq didn't rush her. He let her breathe, let her feel that someone was actually listening. Eventually, Leah spoke again, her voice steadier this time. I don't want to beg, she admitted. I hate holding that sign. People look at me like I don't belong here. But I don't know what else to do. I can't get a job without an address. I can't go back to school without papers. Everything needs something I don't have. It's like I'm locked out of the world. Shaq's chest tightened at her words. He could see the cycle clearly. The system had failed her, and now the world kept shutting its doors. He thought about how easily he could give her money and walk away, but deep down he knew that wouldn't solve anything. She didn't just need charity, she needed someone to actually care. You know what, he said after a pause. You're tougher than you think. Not many people could survive what you've been through. But you don't have to keep fighting alone anymore. Leah's eyes lifted slowly to meet his. What do you mean? Shaq leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. I don't have all the answers yet. But I've got friends, people who know how to help in situations like this. We're gonna figure this out. One step at a time. Leah's lips parted in surprise. She wasn't used to hearing promises like that. Most people gave her $1 or $2 and kept walking. This was different. This man, this stranger who happened to stop, was saying he wasn't going to leave her behind. You don't even know me, she said softly. I don't need to, Shaq replied firmly. I know you're a human being who deserves better. That's enough. For a long moment, Leah didn't respond. Her throat tightened, her eyes stung, but she didn't let the tears fall. Instead, she nodded slowly, her heart unsure whether to believe this could be real. The waitress came back with the check, and Shaq paid without a second thought. As they stepped outside, the night air felt sharper, but Leah didn't feel as cold this time. Shaq walked beside her, his tall frame towering over her small one, almost like a shield. People glanced at them curiously, whispering, but Shaq didn't care. Where have you been staying? He asked as they walked. Mostly downtown, Leah admitted. Sometimes behind stores, sometimes near the park, depends on where it feels safe. Shaq shook his head, his mind racing. A girl her age, wandering the streets with nowhere to go, it wasn't just sad, it was dangerous. Not anymore, he said quietly to himself, though Leah didn't catch the words. They stopped at the corner where he had first seen her. The spot looked even harsher now under the dim streetlight, her small blanket still folded by the wall where she had been sitting. Leah glanced at it, unsure if she should pick it up. You don't have to stay here tonight, Shaq said, breaking the silence. I'll make some calls. I know some shelters, but I want to make sure you're somewhere safe, not just anywhere. Leah's voice was small. Why are you doing this for me? Shaq looked at her, his expression serious but kind. Because you deserve a chance. Because sometimes life throws us into places we can't climb out of alone. And because if I were in your shoes, I'd pray someone would stop and care. Leah hugged her backpack tightly against her chest, the only thing she owned in the world. For the first time in a long while, she felt something other than fear or hunger. She felt the faint spark of hope. As the city moved around them, busy and unaware, Shaq knew this was just the beginning. He didn't know yet how deep the truth about Leah's past went, but he was certain of one thing: he wasn't going to walk away. The night after meeting Leah stayed in Big Shaq's mind like a song he couldn't turn off. He had helped many people before, but something about this young girl felt different. Maybe it was the way her voice carried both strength and sadness, or maybe it was because she reminded him of kids he had seen growing up, kids who slipped through the cracks while the world kept rushing forward. Whatever it was, Shaq couldn't just forget her. The next morning, he sat in his kitchen with a cup of coffee, thinking about Leah's words, "It's like I'm locked out of the world." That line played over and over in his head. He pulled out his phone and began making calls. Shaq had connections, people who worked in charities, youth programs, even social services. If anyone could find out more about Leah's situation, it was them. By noon, he was on the phone with an old friend who worked in child welfare. Shaq explained what had happened, how he had met Leah, and what she had told him about foster care. His friend was quiet for a long moment before saying, "Shaq, cases like this happen more often than you think. Kids slip through the system all the time. Some are moved so much from one home to another that their files get lost. Others are abandoned, and no one follows up properly." Shaq felt his stomach tighten. But she's 16. She's still a child. Somebody's supposed to be looking out for her. "I know," his friend said sadly. "But sometimes people don't. And the worst part? If she's been gone for weeks, someone might not even realize she's missing. The paperwork might say she's still with her assigned guardian." That thought shook Shaq. Could it be that someone was supposed to be caring for Leah but instead had abandoned her completely? He couldn't let it go. He gave his friend Leah's full name and waited as they promised to dig into the records. Later that evening, Shaq met Leah again near the diner. She had been waiting, her backpack resting on the steps, her eyes cautious but brighter than the night before. She had eaten a proper meal yesterday, and it showed in the little energy she carried in her face. "You came back," she said softly when she saw him. "Of course," Shaq said with a smile. "I told you I wasn't leaving you alone in this." They walked together toward the park where the air smelled faintly of grass and street food. Shaq bought them hot chocolate from a vendor, and they sat on a bench. Leah wrapped her hands around the cup as though holding on to warmth itself. "So," Shaq began gently, "I asked around about your case today. You told me you were in foster care before, right?" Leah nodded slowly. "Yeah. But I left. Nobody cared if I stayed or not." Shaq tilted his head. "Do you remember the last house you were in? Whose care you were supposed to be under?" Leah hesitated, then whispered, "My mom's sister. My aunt. She was supposed to take care of me after Mom died." "Where is she now?" Shaq asked. Leah looked away, her face tightening. "She said she couldn't handle me. Said I was too much trouble. So she started leaving me alone for days. Sometimes she wouldn't even be home. That's when I realized I was better off on my own. I left and never went back." Shaq's chest ached hearing that. He didn't tell her, but earlier that day his friend had already found something strange. Leah's aunt was still receiving government checks under Leah's name, money meant to cover Leah's food, shelter, and school expenses. Yet here Leah was, living on the streets, begging for help. Shaq didn't want to overwhelm her with that truth just yet. Instead, he asked, "Did she ever report you missing when you left?" Leah shook her head firmly. "No. If she did, someone would have come looking. Nobody came." Shaq knew she was right. No one had been looking. But now he was. The next few days became a mission for him. Between his own work and appearances, he kept digging deeper into Leah's case. The more he learned, the more angry he became, not at Leah, but at the system and the people who had failed her. His friend confirmed what Shaq feared: Leah's aunt had been claiming support money for nearly a year, pretending Leah was still in her care. Meanwhile, the girl had been sleeping under bridges and in alleyways. When Shaq heard this, his jaw tightened. He wasn't the type to lose his cool easily, but this was different. "She's a child," he said over the phone. "And you're telling me somebody's been using her name to get money while she's out here starving? Nah. That's not happening on my watch." That night, Shaq met Leah again. He found her sitting near the library steps this time, her knees pulled up to her chest. When she saw him, her face lit up faintly, though she tried to hide it. "You keep showing up," she said, almost as if it surprised her. "And I'll keep showing up," Shaq said firmly. He sat beside her. "Leah, I need to tell you something. I've been asking questions about your aunt. Turns out, she's been taking money that was supposed to be for you. Money for food, school, clothes, all of it. But instead, she let you go and never told anyone." Leah froze. The words hit her like a heavy stone. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Slowly, she whispered, "So all this time, she could have helped me." Shaq's voice softened. "Yeah. She should have. But she didn't. And that's not your fault. Don't you ever think it is?" Tears welled in Leah's eyes, though she quickly wiped them with the back of her sleeve. "I thought, maybe I wasn't worth it. Maybe that's why nobody cared." Shaq turned toward her, his large hand resting gently on her shoulder. "Listen to me. You are worth it. More than you even know. People failed you, not the other way around. And now we're gonna make it right." For the first time, Leah let herself cry quietly, the sound barely above a whisper, but it carried years of pain. Shaq didn't say much more. He simply stayed by her side, letting her know she wasn't alone anymore. By the end of the evening, Leah had wiped her tears and leaned back against the wall, her body tired but her spirit a little lighter. Shaq promised her that steps were already being taken. His friend in child welfare was reopening her case. Legal help was being prepared to stop the aunt from continuing the fraud. Leah looked at him with cautious hope. "Do you really think things can change for me?" Shaq nodded firmly. "Yes. 100%. But it's not just about changing where you sleep or what you eat. It's about making sure you get your life back. And you will." That night, as the city lights glowed above them, Leah believed him just a little. And for her, that little bit of hope was more powerful than anything she had felt in a long time. Shaq walked away later, his mind set like stone. He knew now that Leah's struggle wasn't just a random misfortune, it was the result of someone else's neglect and greed. And he wasn't going to let it continue. This wasn't just about charity anymore. It was about justice, about giving a young girl her future back. The days that followed were unlike anything Leah had experienced in her life. For the first time, someone wasn't just offering her loose change or pity, someone was actually fighting for her. Big Shaq had taken her story personally, and that made all the difference. Behind the scenes, Shaq was working hard. His phone never seemed to stop buzzing as he reached out to people who could help: lawyers, child welfare officers, non-profit leaders. Each call revealed more of the truth about Leah's past, and each discovery fueled his determination. The picture became clear: Leah had been abandoned, her case pushed aside, and her name used to collect money that never reached her. One evening, Shaq sat with Leah in a quiet room at his foundation's youth center. The building was a safe place where kids came for tutoring, meals, and mentorship. Leah sat nervously on a couch, still holding her backpack like a shield, while Shaq sat across from her. He had something important to share. "Leah," he said gently, "I've got some news. I told you your aunt was still taking money in your name. Well, we've managed to get your case reopened. That means the law is finally looking at what happened to you." Leah blinked, unsure what to say. The weight of his words sank in slowly. "So, what happens now?" "It means she won't be able to take another dime from you," Shaq explained. "And it means you'll finally get the protection and care you should have had all along. But more than that, I want to make sure you're not just shuffled around again. You need stability, safety, and a chance to build your future." Leah lowered her gaze, her fingers tugging at the zipper of her backpack. "I don't want to go back to another place where nobody wants me," she whispered. Shaq leaned forward, his tone steady and reassuring. "That's not going to happen. You've got me in your corner now. And I'm not letting you slip through the cracks again." For the first time, Leah believed that maybe she could trust those words. She didn't say much, but the small nod she gave carried a world of meaning. The next step was more difficult. Shaq decided to confront the people responsible, not just Leah's aunt, but also the officials who had ignored her case. He knew he couldn't do it alone, so he brought along a lawyer and his friend from child welfare. Together, they arranged a meeting. The room was tense when Leah's aunt arrived, looking surprised and uncomfortable to see Shaq sitting there with officials by his side. She tried to act casual, but Shaq could see the unease in her eyes. "Leah has been living on the streets for weeks," Shaq said firmly, his deep voice filling the space. "And all this time, you've been collecting money meant for her care. Do you have anything to say about that?" The woman stammered, offering excuses about how she had tried her best and how Leah was difficult to handle. But the facts were clear, and the officials had the evidence. She hadn't reported Leah missing, hadn't provided the basics of care, and had continued to take funds dishonestly. For Leah, sitting quietly in the corner of the room, the confrontation was overwhelming. She had spent so long feeling invisible, and now her truth was being spoken out loud by someone powerful who believed her. Watching Shaq stand up for her was like watching a door open to a world she thought she'd never enter. The officials confirmed that action would be taken against her aunt and that Leah would be removed from that fraudulent care arrangement permanently. Leah's heart raced, part fear, part relief. She didn't know what her future would look like yet, but she knew one thing: she wasn't going back to the life she had escaped. After the meeting, Shaq placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You did good," he told her. "This isn't easy, but it's necessary. And from here, things are going to get better." True to his word, Shaq arranged for Leah to move into safe housing through his foundation. The facility wasn't just a shelter, it was a program designed to give young people a chance to rebuild their lives. She had her own room, a warm bed, 3 meals a day, and mentors who checked in on her regularly. The first night Leah lay in her bed, staring up at the ceiling, she couldn't believe it was real. No cold pavement beneath her, no fear of being chased away, no hunger gnawing at her stomach. She pulled the blanket up to her chin and allowed herself a small smile. For the first time in months, she slept peacefully. Over the next few weeks, Leah began to transform. At first, she was quiet, moving carefully as though afraid the comfort would vanish. But slowly, with encouragement and care, she started to come alive again. She enrolled in school through a special program connected to the foundation, and teachers quickly noticed her sharp mind and artistic talent. She loved drawing, often filling notebooks with sketches that reflected both her pain and her hope. Shaq visited often, checking on her progress. Each time, Leah greeted him with a little more confidence, a little more light in her eyes. One afternoon, she showed him a drawing she had been working on, a sketch of the night they first met, her sitting on the sidewalk with her sign and him standing in front of her. Above the picture, she had written in small letters, "The night someone saw me." Shaq held the drawing carefully, his throat tightening. "This is powerful, Leah. Never stop creating. Your voice matters, in art and in life." Leah smiled shyly. "I didn't think anyone would ever see me. But you did." Word of Leah's story began to spread. Local reporters picked it up after hearing how Shaq had stepped in, not just with money, but with time, effort, and genuine care. People were touched by the story of a homeless girl who had been invisible until one person chose to stop and listen. But for Shaq, it wasn't about headlines. It was about a promise he had made to himself and to Leah that she would never be left alone again. He knew her journey wasn't over. Healing would take time, and challenges would still come. But now she had a support system, and she had hope. One evening, as they walked through the youth center garden, Leah looked up at Shaq and said, "You know what I want to do one day? I want to help kids like me. Kids who feel like nobody cares. I want to be the person who sees them." Shaq's face lit up with pride. "That's the spirit. And I believe you'll do exactly that." The revelation hit him then: this wasn't just about rescuing Leah. It was about what Leah could become. She wasn't just a victim, she was a survivor with the potential to inspire and guide others. As the sun set behind them, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Shaq knew this was the turning point. Leah's life had been filled with pain, but now it was being rewritten with hope, purpose, and possibility. And the truth he had discovered through all of this was simple but powerful: sometimes the biggest difference in the world comes from noticing the person everyone else ignores. Months passed, and the cold nights that once defined Leah's life were now only a memory. The streets that had been her home were replaced by something steady, safe, and full of warmth. Leah was no longer the girl sitting on a sidewalk with a cardboard sign. She was a student again, an artist, and most importantly, someone who finally believed she had a future. At the youth center where she now lived, Leah had become known for her quiet kindness. She helped younger kids with homework, often sitting with them patiently, explaining math problems or reading stories aloud. Her gentle way made the children look up to her. Some of them whispered about her drawings, how she could turn blank paper into beautiful pictures that told stories without words. Big Shaq visited often, and each time he stepped into the center, Leah's face lit up. She would rush to show him her latest sketches or share news about her grades. He became more than just the man who had helped her on the sidewalk. He was now a mentor, a father figure, and a steady voice reminding her that she mattered. One afternoon, Shaq arrived carrying a surprise. He walked into the art room where Leah was bent over a sketchbook. "Got something for you," he said, holding a large box wrapped in bright paper. Leah blinked, surprised. "For me?" "Open it," Shaq encouraged with a grin. With careful hands, Leah tore away the wrapping. Inside was a brand new set of art supplies: pencils, paints, brushes, and thick sketchbooks. Leah's eyes widened, her hands hovering over the tools like they were treasures. "I've never had my own set before," she whispered. Shaq smiled. "Now you do. Because I believe your art is going to take you places." Leah's smile stretched wide, and in that moment, she felt a happiness so pure it brought tears to her eyes. She hugged the box tightly and whispered, "Thank you for everything." But Leah's story wasn't just about receiving, it was about growing strong enough to give back. Over time, she began to use her own experience to encourage others. At school, she joined a club that focused on supporting students going through tough times. She spoke quietly at first, sharing little pieces of her journey. But soon, people began listening closely, inspired by her courage. One day, her teacher asked if she would speak at a small community event about resilience. Leah hesitated, her shyness tugging at her, but then she thought of the night she first met Shaq. She remembered his words, "You matter." Those words had given her courage, and now she wanted to pass that same courage to someone else. When the day came, Leah stood nervously on a small stage, holding a microphone. Her voice shook at first, but she took a deep breath and spoke. "There was a time when I thought no one saw me," she began. "I was alone, hungry, and invisible. But then someone stopped. He listened. He told me I mattered. And because of that, I found my way back." The audience was silent, every ear listening. Leah looked out at the faces and added, "I want you to remember sometimes the smallest act of kindness can change someone's life. If you see someone hurting, don't walk past them. Stop. Listen. Because you might be the reason they find hope again." By the time she finished, the room erupted in applause. Leah's cheeks flushed, but inside, she felt stronger than ever. For the first time, she wasn't just surviving her story, she was using it to inspire others. Shaq stood at the back of the room, watching proudly. He didn't need the spotlight, seeing Leah shine was enough. Later, when he walked up to her, he placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I told you, Leah. You're gonna make a difference." She looked up at him, her eyes bright with determination. "I want to help kids like me," she said firmly. "Kids who feel forgotten. I want them to know they're not alone." And Shaq knew she meant it. He could see it in her posture, in her voice, in the way she now carried herself. The broken girl he had met months ago was now a young woman full of promise and purpose. As Leah's story spread through the community, more people reached out wanting to help. Donations poured into the youth center, inspired by the way Shaq had taken the time to notice one girl. Leah's art was even displayed in a small gallery, her sketches telling powerful stories of loss, hope, and resilience. People who viewed her work often left in tears, touched by the emotions she captured. But for Leah, the most important part wasn't the attention or praise, it was the chance to give others hope. She began mentoring younger girls at the center, teaching them how to draw and listening when they needed to talk. She told them gently, "I know how it feels to be invisible. But you're not invisible here." Months turned into a year, and Leah's life was unrecognizable compared to where she had started. She had gone from a sidewalk to a classroom, from hunger to nourishment, from silence to a voice that could move hearts. One evening, at a press conference for his foundation, Shaq stood at the podium surrounded by flashing cameras. But instead of talking about himself, he gestured to Leah, who stood shyly at his side. "This young woman right here is proof of why we do what we do," he said. "She's not just a survivor, she's a fighter, a dreamer, and a leader. And I believe she's going to change the world." The crowd applauded, and Leah's cheeks turned pink, but deep inside, she felt something she hadn't felt in years, pride in herself. Later, when the event was over and the room had emptied, Leah turned to Shaq. "Do you think Mom would be proud of me?" she asked softly. Shaq smiled gently. "Leah, she'd be more than proud. She'd be amazed at the strength you've shown. And I know she'd be grateful you never gave up." Leah nodded, her heart swelling with peace. She wasn't the same girl anymore. She had grown, healed, and found a purpose bigger than her pain. The story of a homeless girl begging on a cold street and the man who stopped to help had touched millions, but for Leah, the true miracle wasn't in the headlines, it was in the simple truth that someone had seen her, believed in her, and given her the chance to see herself again. And as she stood beside Shaq, her eyes full of dreams for the future, she whispered to herself, "This is just the beginning."